Hello and welcome to the 6th tutorial that looks at the spreadsheet section of the GCSE ICT Unit 2 controlled test. Now in the last tutorial we looked at using a formula with a single operator to find the percentage of each player's attendance. And what we did, we formatted this cell here to show a percentage. We also decreased the number of decimal places that shows. So rather than being 100.00, we just showed it as a whole number, so we dropped it to 0 decimal places. So that's worth 1 mark as well. We also used the single operator formula, which if I click on the cell here, although it shows 100%, which is the value that's shown in the actual cell, you can actually see in the formula bar that when I click here inside this cell, that the actual data that's contained in the cell is the formula itself. Okay, so this means if I change a value of one of the cell references in the formula, so either C8 or B5, then the actual value that's shown here should change from 100%. Now obviously the total amount of matches isn't going to change, that's exactly the same every time. But this one here is a variable, so this might be slightly different for each player. So you can see now, because of the formula, it shows 100% at the moment, because it just literally divides the value in this cell, which is C8, and the value of B5. So it divides this by this. So if I change this to 10, obviously we know that that should then drop to 50%. And if my formula is correct, it will work. So there we are. You can see that that's worked. So if I click here, the formula is contained in the formula bar there, but the actual value that's shown is the result of this particular formula here. So this divided by this. So then, what we need to do now, as I said in the last tutorial, we looked at using the fill handle to drag this down and apply it to each one of these cells beneath it. But unfortunately, as you can see, this doesn't work. Now what relative referencing does, if I just click onto sheet 2 here, say if I did that formula here, so I'll do equals to start the formula, this, the number of games they've played, divided by the total number of matches that were available. So I press enter, and again it shows as 100%. Now what I've done here is I've made a whole column which is for the total of matches. So this will be the same in every single part of this column because it's always out of 20. But this is quite time consuming, and it also makes the spreadsheet bigger than it needs to be because I've had to insert a new column and I've had to spend the time putting in the different values in that column. So I'll show you how it works with relative referencing. If I use the fill handle here, you'll see there my formula C4 divided by B4, 2 cells next to each other. If I click and drag that down, that's actually worked it out perfectly, and it's done it really quickly as well. And the reason for this is Excel guesses that you're saying, well, I want to divide this cell by this cell, and it gives me the percentage, and I can just click and drag it down and apply it to every cell. So if I look in this cell here now, you'll see that the formula slightly changes every time in the formula bar. C4 divided by B4, C5 divided by B5. So what it does, it drags the formula down and applies it to the cell beneath. But what it actually does is it just slightly changes the cell references. And this works because they're actually in line with each other, so it's easy. However, in our particular spreadsheet example, we haven't got this column here. What we've got is the 20 up in a cell there. So if you imagine, what happens if I try and drag it down? It's C8 here divided by B5 here. So if I drag this formula down, what happens is it drags the cell reference down from there to there, but it also then drags this down from there to there, and so on and so on. And this is why you get these warnings here. So then, what we need to do is something called an absolute cell reference. So what will happen is, when I drag this down, the C8, the C9, C10, and so on will actually change all the way down to there, all the way down to C19. But this needs to stay, this cell reference needs to be exactly the same every time. So what we'll do, if I just get rid of those, is I'll click on that one. And because I want this to change every time, the C8, I want it to go to C9, C10, C11, C12. I'm going to keep that the same as it is. However, with B5, I want that to stay the same exactly every time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an absolute cell reference. And the way that we do this is if I put a $ in there, so shift and the number 4 key before the column reference, which is B, and I also put a $ in there before the row reference, which in this case is 5, it means that that cell reference, when I drag it down, will stay exactly where it is. However, C8 will change to C9, C10 and so forth. So I'll press enter, and what should happen now, if I drag it down, you'll notice that it's worked. But if I click on here and we look in the formula bar, you can see that C8 divided by B5, but the $ are there, and now it's just C9. So the actual cell reference changes for the first part of the formula, but not for the second. And when you put these $ in here, the way I always think about it, to make it absolute, and remember you must put the $ before the cell reference that you want to keep where it is. I think of it like putting padlocks on them. So you're locking that cell reference in. So that one can't change, but these ones here can. And that's how we do an absolute cell reference. And this, if we look at the mark scheme, is, where is it now? It's here. We've got relative referencing, which we've looked at, but I'll show you how to use that actually in this example later on. But we've got an absolute cell reference here, and that is one of your 4 advanced marks. So currently we've covered here, we will cover borders, merge cells and text wrap, but this one we have actually used for the time being, text wrapping. And there we've also used absolute cell referencing. So you can see that it's really useful, because if I go back to the spreadsheet, that's the wrong one. If I go back here, you can see that really these could change. I could have just typed these in wrong. I know for a fact that there's 20 games that have been played altogether, but I may have entered this in wrong. So it could be that they haven't actually played 7 games. I just mistyped it and they'd 17. So now you can see that my formula is great, because as soon as I change that, I don't have to change anything else. It just changes it in here to 17, and there my formula makes it and works it out perfectly. So that's an absolute cell reference, a really, really, really useful skill in Microsoft Excel.